Pivoting from the pernicious poverty definition, turning towards a more accurate poverty measure, by Merrit, Mccaleb, Sarah Wittpenn, and Sarah Zungalia. Through readings and discussions in our Intro to Poverty and Human Capabilities Studies class, we have come to analyze and critique the current poverty measure. It is to our belief that the current ideals and official definition are slowly causing harm, as it leads to a misrepresentation of current poverty rates. This leaves people uneducated and falsely informed, which in turn causes a plethora of issues. Through this video, we will continue to critique various measures and share our opinions on how we believe poverty should be properly defined and measured. We think that most people would agree that poverty is a large issue on our planet today. The media frequently discusses and shines light on the problems facing the impoverished part of the human population. However, it is important to think further and try to answer the question of what should we do about poverty? In order to do so, people need to first understand what is poverty? How can we measure it? What causes it? Who's experiencing it? All these questions are multifaceted and require deep analysis and understanding. Broadly, poverty can be thought of as deprivation. John Iceland, a well-known sociology professor and author, believes that poverty is a state of economic deprivation, meaning they, the people who are considered poor, don't have enough. However, this prompts the question, enough of what? As we have learned, poverty does not just relate to economic standings. There are other aspects that we have to take into consideration. We, as a group, have considered them when forming our own definition.
So, how do we define poverty? We believe that poverty is an individual's state of being in which they lack the access to both essential resources and the opportunities to actively participate in one's society in a way that maintains dignity. These essential resources include the needs for survival, including food, water, and shelter. However, this also includes non-discretionary needs, such as healthcare, education, and travel. These non-discretionary needs are important because a person living in today's world cannot truly live or participate as a fully contributing member of society without having access to these things. And how should we measure this concept? Are quantitative measurements enough, or should we shift our focus to a more qualitative measurement? For our proposed measurement, we wanted to look at an individual's income to see if that gives that individual the ability to acquire both basic resources and non-discretionary needs. We also wanted to look at the individual's capability to meet these needs. So, our measurement of poverty combines that of the supplemental poverty measure, as it provides a concrete number, as well as the capabilities approach. We suggest maintaining that the SPM threshold that separates those who are in poverty between those who are not. However, we propose incorporating various subcategories under this threshold that differentiates between an impoverished person who is homeless versus an impoverished person who perhaps has food and shelter but lacks the ability to adequately socialize and participate in society. We wanted to include the capabilities approach because, as we will discuss later, it accounts for mental well-being, emotions, and whether or not someone is being socially excluded or included.
The official poverty measure, also known as the OPM, creates thresholds for different family compositions that are compared to a before-tax income. The thresholds are calculated by taking the thrifty food basket, or the cost of a household-based nutritious diet, and multiplying by 3. This multiplication was decided by the fact that people typically spend a third of their budget on food. Though this is the measure used by the Census Bureau, we see many issues with it. Specifically, the OPM does not account for non-cash government policies such as payroll taxes or in-kind public benefit programs like SNAP or Medicaid. Another issue is the lack of adjustments as the standards of living change over time. Geographical locations create a major difference in the cost of living, as rent for the same size apartment will be way higher in New York City than Lexington, Virginia. The OPM also lacks consideration for other important expenses besides food. People have other non-discretionary expenses such as medical care, childcare, and transportation to and from work. As a result, it doesn't accurately capture the amount of disposable income someone truly has. For example, if Jack has an ongoing medical condition and receives Medicaid help, while Jill has the same condition but doesn't get Medicaid, and they make the same amount of money, Jack still will have more disposable income than Jill, as she has to spend more money on her medical condition. By not taking these into account, the OPM inaccurately measures poverty by leaving out factors of income and livelihood. The supplemental poverty measure, also known as the SPM, is another threshold that works towards a more accurate and well-rounded measure of poverty. The SPM takes the 33rd percentile of expenditures for food, clothing, shelter, utilities spending of families with 2 children and multiplies it by 1.2. Though it adjusts for modern family composition, geographical locations, government in-kind benefits, and other necessary expenses, it is still one number and a stringent line. We see fault in the SPM because, like the OPM, it funnels all parts of human life into one number and groups people that may fall right below the line with people that may be completely homeless, which in our opinion represents 2 different livelihoods. Though the SPM provides a lens to see the shortcomings of the OPM and how the OPM may overestimate poverty levels in some areas and underestimate poverty levels in others, there are still several problems with it. The SPM still only uses FCSU costs when calculating the threshold. Though individuals may be able to pay for all their food, clothing, shelter, and utilities, there are other things that are going to contribute to livelihood. People should have enough money to feel like they can participate in society and have self-fulfillment. We believe that these aspects are critical to think about when discussing poverty and believe that our poverty measure accurately includes them.
Now I'm going to talk about the capabilities approach. An important aspect of this approach is that we need to look at poverty as more than how much someone is earning and their income, because there are many more unmeasurable components that play a big role in fulfilling someone's life goals. So what should be included in the poverty measure? Income is important and plays a significant role, but paying for healthcare, childcare, home, transportation, and food, with or without government benefits, is a big part of life and could have a huge effect on someone's financial situation. We would define the capabilities approach as the combination of doings and beings. This means you have the tools to be able to do what you want in life. I think the significant part in this definition is ability, because that means you're at a point in your life where you're actually living and enjoying your life while maintaining your dignity. Within this concept of capabilities is the idea of functioning, which is an important component because these are considered attainable actions within your capabilities. This might include basic needs like housing, education, healthcare, childcare, transportation, and food to support their family. These are all achievable actions within one's life. Now I'm going to talk about 2 authors' point of views on the capabilities approach. First off, in Amartya Sen's Capability and Well-Being, she talks about the concept of well-being achievement versus well-being freedom. I think this means that well-being achievement is using your capabilities to have success in your job and whatever else that leads to your fulfillment in life. The well-being freedom is that because of your capabilities and how well off in life you are, there are types of things that you have access to in life. Freedom helps define what we're able to do and be. I think that a very general measure of poverty should not focus solely on income, because it should also take into consideration the differences in demographics, because the income and cost of living in New York City is going to be quite different than that of a rural city in the Midwest. Next, in Martha Nussbaum's video, she says that she prefers the capability approach over the GDP because the GDP groups everything together. There's not enough distinction between groups, so those who are further in poverty are not getting enough attention as they need. Nussbaum proposed the idea of combined capabilities. This means people have internal capabilities as well as social, political, economic capabilities that are part of the functionings that can be met. Within these, there are internal, which include emotional and thoughts, and external, which include healthcare, jobs, homes, and food. And these abilities are necessary, and the combined capabilities are things that you need to have fulfillment in life. Nussbaum says that all citizens should have these central capabilities, which include life, bodily health, bodily integrity, SIT, which is an acronym for sense, imagination, and thought, emotions, practical reason, affiliation, other species, play, and control over one's environment. These are all important to understand about someone's welfare, but the biggest concern I have with the list is how do you measure all 10 of these capabilities? The capabilities approach is hard to measure because there's not a good proxy that covers all regions and states. The capabilities approach is difficult to measure as there are not often numerical values associated with each central capability that Nussbaum proposed.
In his article from 2011, poverty researcher Robert Rector argues that current, though this is from over 10 years ago, U.S. Census Bureau annual reports exaggerate poverty and the extent to which people experience economic deprivation. His main argument centers around how poverty is an extreme economic deprivation to the point that an individual is unable to access food, water, and shelter. He suggests that the actual amount of people in poverty is less than the OPM accounts for. Rector's strongest, most convincing point throughout his article is his point regarding media coverage, as perhaps the idea of poverty that the news has conveyed to us may not accurately represent the reality of impoverished individuals. For example, the media tends to equate homelessness to poverty, whereas someone who is in poverty may not be homeless. Rector's argument certainly emphasizes how poverty may remain inconspicuous and unseen throughout the U.S., as some impoverished people may still own a house, a car, etc. However, despite the aforementioned pros, the majority of Rector's argument is misleading and outdated. First, he fails to acknowledge that the standards of living change as time progresses. For example, he presents a computer as a luxury, yet over time, the computer has evolved into an essential tool used daily for learning and work purposes. Additionally, simply owning an amenity does not imply that an individual has access to a steady income or to opportunities, because perhaps that item was passed down or was a gift. Further, that item may not work properly. Along this point, Rector fails to mention any other sort of poverty measurement except for income. He neglects factors of an individual's capabilities, such as social exclusion and mental well-being. Rector severely downplays poverty in the U.S., making it seem like a much smaller problem. In our opinion, the cons of Rector's argument significantly outweigh the pros. Thus, we deem his argument as an insubstantial way to measure and define poverty. However, we do agree with Rector's concern about how not everyone who is under the poverty threshold experiences the same level of poverty, as some people may be significantly below the threshold and are struggling, whereas others may lie just below the threshold and are better off. This is why, in our measure, we suggest having different subcategories of people in poverty, so that we can properly differentiate and help people based on their situation. So, what is poverty? As stated earlier, we believe that poverty is basically an individual's state of being in which they lack the access to both essential resources and to opportunities to actively participate in one's society in a way that maintains their dignity. Given our research and understanding of the various methods and measurements currently used or proposed, we believe that our definition and proposed measurement of incorporating both a supplemental poverty measure that includes subcategories, as well as the capabilities approach, best handles the critiques that we've found while analyzing the aforementioned measurements. Additionally, we find that the capabilities approach, instead of being a completely abstract measurement, actually provides an accurate measurement, as it looks at things like literacy tests, SAT scores, morbidity rates, etc. In conclusion, everyone's understanding of poverty is always changing and growing. We may never find a perfect poverty measure, but we believe that ours is a great way to understand, define, and measure poverty.